A guten Erev Shabbos and a freiliche Chanukah. This week's Insight I'm recording with my Kita Hey Gemara Talmidim. Talmidim, there are two words, couldn't and wouldn't. Wouldn't means would not. In other words, did not want to. Couldn't means could not, was not able to. So let me ask you a question with the following sentences. Answer couldn't or wouldn't. David had a cast on both legs. He couldn't or wouldn't go to the class party.
Couldn't.
Shimon was angry with his friends. He couldn't or wouldn't go to the class party.
Couldn't.
The brothers were angry with Yosef. They couldn't or wouldn't speak to him nicely.
Couldn't.
Correct. Which brings us to this week's parsha. The pasuk says, "Vayira Echav ki oisayav aviv mikol echav." When Yosef's brothers saw that Yaakov loved Yosef more than the other brothers, they hated him. And the pasuk says, "V'lo yachlu daber l'shalom." They could not speak to him in a friendly way. Really, it should have said wouldn't, not couldn't. Explains Rashi, "Mitoich genusam labmadnu shivcham." That although the pasuk is telling us something negative about the brothers, that they hated him, it's also telling us something positive about the brothers, which is shlei dibru achas bapeh v'achas belev. They could not speak one thing with their mouth and have another different thing in their hearts. So it wasn't that they wouldn't, they actually couldn't. They were so truthful and honest that they couldn't speak to him in a way of peace. This week's Erev Chanukah was my mother, Alea Shalom's yahrzeit, Mrs. Miriam Rosenblum. She was born in the former Soviet Union in Samarkand. When she was a little girl, she traveled with her parents to Moscow. Now, my grandfather, Rabbi Nachum Volosov, was involved in spreading Yiddishkeit, teaching Torah, collecting money for the yeshivas, and he was in Moscow illegally. They were staying in an apartment, and all of a sudden they heard that KGB agents were coming to find him. He immediately ran next door and hid under a bed in the apartment next door. The KGB agent knocked on the door, and my grandmother answered the door. They said to her, "Where is Reb Nachum? Where's your husband?" She says, "I have no idea where he is." They turned to my mother, the little girl. They said, "Ardie Papa, where's your father?" My mother said, "Oh, I'll show you where my father is." She took him next door to the apartment and pointed to under the bed. They pulled him out from under the bed, and miraculously, they said, "You have to leave Moscow immediately." They could have punished him in a much worse way than that, but they said, "You need to leave immediately." Afterwards, my grandparents called in my mother, and they said to her, "Why did you tell them where your father was?" She said, "Didn't you tell me, Tati and Mommy, that I always have to tell the truth?" This character trait of emes, sincerity and truth, is one of the many special characteristics that character traits that my mother had. The Eibusher should help, that her neshama should have an aliyah, and we all should learn from that character trait and incorporate emes, truth, in our lives in every which way possible. Have a wonderful Shabbos and a freilichen Chanukah.